Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 42 part 1 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode we will begin the deep dive into May 1970. In an action-packed episode, we explore Jimi's continuing US leg of the Cry of Love tour, including the Milwaukee Auditorium, Dane County Memorial Coliseum, and St. Paul Civic Center performances, plus much more. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Friday, May 1st, 1970, sees Hendrix performing at the Milwaukee Auditorium, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with support act Oz. Bobby Tanzilo from the On Milwaukee website explains, when May 1st arrived, anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 fans filed into the auditorium's main room, Bruce Hall. Though there were violent outbreaks at shows in Berkeley and New York, among some who believe the concerts ought to be free, the Milwaukee show appears to have passed without incident, at least nothing worthy of reaching the daily newspapers. Before the gig, bodyguard Vic Buff recalled that Hendrix relaxed with some wine. Maybe he had a joint, a bottle of pink pussycat wine. He liked wine. He wasn't a heavy doper or heavy drinker. He wanted to have some faculties, but do something to loosen up. And then Hendrix and company played a roughly hour-long set in the big hall, opening by saying, "Hello, how are you feeling? Pretend that you got a nightclub in here." And then launching into Spanish Castle Magic and 9 other songs. Lover Man, Hear My Train A-Comin', Easy Rider, Freedom, Message of Love, Foxy Lady, The Star-Spangled Banner, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child, Slight Return. What struck me was some of the newer material like Freedom and Easy Rider, more like serious musical compositions, not just 3-minute songs. I think a lot of people wanted to hear Hendrix's hits, Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, etc. And they did do some of those, but you could see that Hendrix was trying to stretch out musically. Said one audience member. Hendrix interacted a few times with the audience, later on noting that everyone appeared to have been sitting down, thanks to a security force that worked hard to send eager fans in the aisles back to their seats and, unsuccessfully, based on what some recall, quash the smoking of weed. In an interesting side note, some folks who attended the show recalled a woman occupying a chair on stage next to the drums at both the Madison and Milwaukee shows. I was barely able to make her out in my photos, Hendrix expert Rob Lewis says. The elusive fact was that the woman on stage was Lynn Collins, Mitch's wife. She was pregnant, and Mitch didn't want to leave her behind, hence he brought her on the road with him. Sitting next to her husband's drum kit was not a part of the act. According to Lewis, a fair quality audience tape reveals lively playing with a shorter set list, but much new material. In describing Hendrix's unique guitar techniques, legendary Milwaukee guitarist, Sam McHugh observed that Jimi would open up the amp all the way up and use dynamics with his hands. It was all in his hands. He rarely touched the controls except to change pickups. If fans were impressed, most of the media was less so, having, as was the norm in those days, staffers with little understanding or appreciation for rock and roll. In the Sentinel, Patty Collar wrote, rock singer Jimi Hendrix called the tribe together Friday night. About 3,000 responded, choking the Milwaukee Auditorium to its seating capacity. You may not like Hendrix, you might not even want to classify his sound as music, but after an hour of it, if your eardrums haven't collapsed, the vibrations get to you. Most of those in the definitely under 30 crowd stuck closely to their seats, puffing their mod peace pipes. Trying to enforce the no-smoking ordinance turned out to be an impossible task. Guards continuously had to prod a few of the young people back into their seats, away from the stage and Hendrix. The black singer-guitarist had a red, white, and bluish-purple scarf tied around his afro-styled hair. The group went wild with Easy Rider. Some got up and began to do a snake dance. By Foxy Lady. It went out of its mind into pure, primitive passion. Hendrix invited everyone to stand for an acid rock version of the Star-Spangled Banner. Sweat glistened on his face, his eyes barely open. A group rushed to the front of the stage, some trying to touch Hendrix. Others held their hand clenched in a fist, or in the V sign of peace. Then Hendrix said it was over, that he had to be in Madison the next day. Fury broke loose as the kids shouted for "moo" in one long scream, repeated again and again. But it was over, and though a few stamped their feet up and down, they eventually streamed out into the cool and relatively quiet night. Even Milwaukee's counterculture Bible, the Kaleidoscope, reported a less than stellar evening. Hendrix concert Friday the 1st was a tired affair on Jimmy's part, wrote an unnamed reviewer. Absolute minimal involvement with the city and audience being performed for, and it's sad to see one of the greatest sliding around in a rut and reduced to doing gigs or whatever motions Jimmy was going through. Crowd didn't like the short set, and the indifference either, and after the curtain closed there were a couple of minutes when they might have swung in the direction of trashing the auditorium. The energy swell didn't reach upward enough, however, and we were left with piss-off and astonishment vibes dissipating out on the street. While the Journal's Gerald J. Jackson groaned, "Noise, noise, noise," it was that kind of experience Friday night, when the blues rock sound of Jimi Hendrix and his group blasted through the Milwaukee Auditorium. Several thousand fans sat in aisles and stood on seats throughout the performance, responding enthusiastically as Hendrix picked a guitar and sang. But Hendrix came off as a tired, noisy blues rock singer, his voice strained as he sang. The show seemed to be without feeling. Jackson complained that Hendrix dared to blend white music and black music, saying, "Hendrix tried to combine the sound of white rock music with that of the black blues, and the attempt was disappointing. Rather than create one sound or the other, Hendrix is lost somewhere in between. The overamplification of the instruments and the mod style of flashy clothes gave the performance an air of phoniness. Perhaps the real Hendrix sound will come out in a couple of years." The sole bright spot was a review, with a photo of Hendrix taken at the show in the African-American newspaper, the Milwaukee Star, which enjoyed the performance and took the Journal reviewer to task. While in the Milwaukee Star, "Labels are a drag," wrote Dave Novick. "It's always easier to categorize people, objects, lifestyles, and types of music than it is to try and understand them." Jimi Hendrix is a case in point. A black man, singer and guitarist, his popularity and success is largely the result of white adulation. Many blacks have never heard of him, while some white teens have large posters of him on their walls. Others put him down, as they do the Fifth Dimension and Tina Turner, for not playing what they consider black music. On the other side of the fence, the same mentality has blocked talents like James Brown from the popularity they deserve in the general marketplace. Hendrix and his newly reformed Experience played for about an hour last Friday night to an overflow crowd at the Milwaukee Auditorium. It was not a good concert in terms of poor acoustics, not long enough set, and the bad vibrations that come from buying $4.50 ticket for a seat 2 city blocks away from the stage. Hendrix, however, sang well and played well. What he did to the national anthem, a notoriously bad song from a musical standpoint, was the nicest thing that happened to it in a long time. If the Daughters of the American Revolution, the first one that is, hear about it, the brother will be persona non grata in Milwaukee's Municipal Auditorium, should he want to return. 10,000 of tomorrow's leaders dug it, though. A daily newspaper critic panned the artist for what he considered his not playing black music or white music, but unsuccessfully straddling the fence between. No, so. Hendrix plays and whatever it is, he plays it well. It's too bad there were only a few hundred blacks in the audience to enjoy it. If Milwaukee's show was a letdown for some, there were contributing factors, says Lewis. Jimmy was not feeling well but didn't cancel, says the rock and roll historian. To make matters worse, the acoustics in the auditorium were unworkable and created an overall incoherent sound. Although Jimmy was feeling sick, he tore through the set with his usual vigor, grandstanding his showmanship. After the concert, he collapsed and went back to his hotel. According to Lewis's website, Hendrix detoured to the scene before calling it a night. He often liked going to a club to see a band or sit in after a concert, Lewis writes. The scene was a familiar place as Hendrix had played there in 1968. Milwaukee music promoter and manager of the scene, Benedetta Balistrieri, recalled, "We expected to see Jimmy at the scene that night, and he stopped by. I remember seeing him walk up the staircase into the bar area. He remembered me instantly and was excessively friendly when he grabbed me. I always felt we were good friends and I welcomed him back to the club. It was a happy moment, but brief." Back at the hotel, Hendrix didn't seem to find his bed too quickly either, according to bodyguard Vic Buff, who told Lewis. "There was a good amount of alcohol back at the hotel room, because I made a stop at the store earlier that day. But Jimmy took off to a party somewhere. I saw him the next day before he headed out of town. I assume Jimmy got a good night's sleep at some point, because the following day in Madison was one of the best shows on the tour, and the recording was spectacular," Lewis says. Saturday, the 2nd of May, Dane County Memorial Coliseum, Madison, Wisconsin, with support acts Savage, Grace and Oz, concert setlist. Fire, Room Full of Mirrors, Getting My Heart Back Together Again, Lover Man, Red House, Message to Love, Easy Rider, Machine Gun, The Star-Spangled Banner, Foxy Lady, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, and drum solo followed by Purple Haze. Charlene Harris, for the Wisconsin State Journal, wrote, "The Jimi Hendrix Experience played to about 5,000 people in the Dane County Coliseum Saturday night. It was the best rock concert of the year, maybe the best Madison has ever had. What emerges from the enormous range of effects and attitudes in Hendrix's music is the sense of a serious man trying to take care of some important business. He seems to be trying to arrange all the forces he can find around a single point, with enough weight behind it to make a breakthrough into a new music and a new culture, and he may be a musician who will do it for rock." The 115-minute segment of the show Saturday night made a visible lot of the levels Hendrix is working with. After winding through a few courses of persuasive Mississippi-style blues, he asked everyone to stand up and raise a fist with one arm or a peace sign with the other, but it was obvious that many people could respond to both symbols at the same time, without worrying about the contradiction. As it turned out, the contradiction didn't matter too much because Hendrix began to play. The Star-Spangled Banner, over the armloads of V signs and fists in the audience, listened with deadly silence. It would have made an old-style patriot turned pale, and not because it was a parody or burlesque of, because it made explicit the state of mind of many members of America's youth culture. It was chilling to hear it so plainly and so seriously. "No matter where your loyalties lay, I want to dedicate this to all the soldiers in Madison, Milwaukee and Chicago," Hendrix said. Before he played It Only Asks into the soldiers in Cambodia. The arrangement of all the forces, and no one missed the point. Then came Foxy Lady, one of the best-known Hendrix songs, and it showed where the guitarist is pushing things. Hendrix went through a few courses of the straight stuff, just like on the album, started traveling up in incline of relentless chord changes with Hendrix in the lead building volume drawing the patterns tighter until suddenly he reached the top of the scale, found a hole, and dropped through it. It was an unmeasurable stretch of freefall after that, Hendrix pushing electronic effects out of his machine, picking them up and stuffing them back in as though he were trying to reach a state of eternal feedback. One-time stops in all the forces, locked in all very romantic business this. But the astonishing thing is that with all be behind the backs, strumming string, plucking with the teeth, all that flashy frenzy, Hendrix keeps us a line moving with complete coherence and sublime originality. Electric guitar after Hendrix is a different instrument, and rock is a different music. While Dave Wagner in the Capital Times wrote, "Out of sight is the only way to describe the Jimi Hendrix experience that took place at the Dane County Memorial Coliseum Saturday night. The group gave a superb performance that made people bounce in their seats and clap their hands to his beat. Jimi treated his enthusiastic audience to the blues rock and acid rock. He changed guitars 6 times and even played with his teeth, taking great care to make sure each instrument was well tuned," he explained to his audience. "Gotta make sure all the goodies is right for you." Jimi was very personable throughout the performance. He talked to the audience about the meaning behind his songs, Bobby Seale and Cambodia. To say that he performed to the utmost still cannot convey the experience that the audience underwent. He did everything from playing the guitar between his legs to playing it behind his head. The audience today is very much a part of the actual performance that is seen on stage. A young man in the crowd hollered out to Jimi, "What can we give you?" His reply was, "A joint." In trying to describe further the experience, it's hard to see whether his guitars were an extension of him, or vice versa. His facial expressions further illustrated the sounds of his guitar. Pain and joy could all be clearly seen and felt. Jimi asked the audience to stand up while he played his own rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. During the song's instruments sometimes vibrated like a machine gun, and then his body would writhe as if receiving the bullets. The audience just never sat back down. He received a standing ovation, and the crowd yelled for more. Sunday, the 3rd of May, St. Paul Civic Center, St. Paul, Minnesota. With support acts, Savage, Grace and Oz, concert setlist, Fire, Room Full of Mirrors, Lover Man, Getting My Heart Back Together Again, Easy Rider, Machine Gun, Freedom, Foxy Lady, Red House, The Star-Spangled Banner, Purple Haze and Voodoo Child, Slight Return. Jimi plays St. Paul, Phil Carson wrote in Univibes. The 1970 Cry of Love tour is one of my favorite periods in Jimi's career. The new sounds he got with the Univibe effect unit, the fresher set lists and more mature guitar playing all produced, for me, some of his best music. From photographs taken at the show, we know Jimi's dressed in black leather pants, a faux leopard skin belt, ruffled shirt, floral vest and headband. The photographs show Hendrix with both a black Stratocaster and a white one. Jimi starts his performance by announcing, "Give us about another 20 seconds, and we'll get our guitars in tune," and so forth. "You know we haven't been here in such a long time. We'd like to dedicate this one to whoever's listening." Crowd laughter. "Shit, now I'm all out of tune," says Jimi to more laughter. "What the hell, cowboys want to stay in tune anyway. We got this one song, going through a few changes here and there that some of us do once in a while. So it's called The Room Full of Mirrors. It explains itself. There's a certain point where we'd like to get out of it and see what else the world has to offer, you know, besides ourselves." Jimi begins Room Full of Mirrors with furious rhythm guitar work, then lead over rhythm for several bars longer than usual before he recites the lyrics. A brief, incisive solo follows. He even performs the vocal equivalent of echo with the line, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." Too soon he sings along with a set of descending notes, and the song is over. Though this song difficult to perform in concert due to the complex layering of guitar tracks he had laid down in the studio, became a staple of Jimi's 1970 sets. It is unique to find him playing it this early in a show. But this seems to reflect a go-for-broke attitude demonstrated throughout the St. Paul concert. Yeah, then we got this other one. It's called Look Out Baby, I Must Be Splitting, 'cause here comes your lover man, and he just got back from the war, so you know he must be able to kick some garbled. Anyway, the band cranks up Lover Man, a good old rocker that often graced the early portions of Jimi's 1970 shows. After the first chorus, Jimi plays the signature glissandos that describe the melody to Flight of the Bumblebee. The band is tight. Suddenly, after a prolonged burst of unprovoked feedback, the sound quality settles down and one can clearly hear the buzz of the group's amps. "All this static around," Jimi says. "Here we are trying to make some good, decent static for you, and we're getting all this other static. I'd like to, I don't know really. I'd like to do a slow blues about this cat who feels kinda down, 'cause his old lady put him down, and his people and family don't want him around. So he had this big old long frown, and had to drag his ass down to the railroad station, waiting for the train to come take him away on the road. Be a voodoo child, magic warrior, come back, do it to his old lady one more time. Give her a piece because she's all nice to him again." The crowd laughs, and Jimi slips into one of his comic voices. "And that's what this song is about, thank you very much. It's called Getting My Heart Back Together." After a bit of tuning, Jimi announces, "Yeah, we'd like to do another song called Easy Rider." After a long, slow blues number, Jimi wants to rock. He always knew how to pace a show. Now Mitch begins a drum intro that, as with much of the set so far, would be completely unfamiliar to the St. Paul audience, as Jimi had not played the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, since the 2nd of November 1968. Tonight, we recognize Mitch's beat instantly as the lead-in to Easy Rider. "Jimi, yeah, we might as well do another song for you, as soon as we get tuned up. We dedicate this one to the soldiers fighting in Milwaukee, and, Chicago, Philadelphia, oh yes, and Vietnam and Cambodia. There's so many wars going on though. This is actually dedicated to a lot of other people fighting wars within themselves." A bit of tuning follows, then the opening lines to Machine Gun ring out across the arena. Jimi intones the lyrics and his Strat cries in anguish. "3 times the pain, and your own self to blame, yeah, Machine Gun, let your bullets fly like rain." There's a lot of great guitar work here that defies description, as anyone might imagine. A huge blast of feedback marked the end of this song. "Yeah, right," Jimi says casually after closing out Red House. "Everybody stand for this number so we can help each other out. It's the American anthem." Then in a farcical voice, "So we're all Americans, right? Let us stand and support our country. Everybody stand." Jimi then drowns himself out in a blast of feedback, because we'll play it exactly as it is today. Jimi plays a roaring version of the Star-Spangled Banner with the usual digressions for bombs and screams. He yells something unintelligible then, and our flag was still there. And suddenly the band is raging into Purple Haze. Miraculously, Jimi's guitar is still in tune. Carson goes on to say, after his spirited St. Paul performance, Jimi attended the after-show party. He left behind a pretty good impression on the only known St. Paul concert reviewer. Jimi Hendrix sheds excess showiness, puts focus on guitar, reads the headline of a local review in the St. Paul Dispatch the next day, written by Marshall Fine, identified in a tagline after the piece as a student in journalism at the University of Minneapolis. "It's as if lead guitarists have fallen out of vogue," Fine wrote. "Suddenly everyone is into horns. It's as if the days of the guitar solo are numbered." Jimi Hendrix, sans horns, brought all the focus back to the guitar Sunday night during his concert at the St. Paul Auditorium. Hendrix was leaner and meaner than when he played here in November 1968. The most notable improvement is the cutaway of excess flash that used to be a standard in his act. More appreciable now is Hendrix's amazing talent that has been lurking beneath the garish showiness. Hendrix started off Sunday with a fast light version of "Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire," one of the songs from his first album. His short solo showed right away that he is calmer, cleaner and more imaginative than he was over a year ago. There was fluidity in his guitar work that he's never shown before. All Hendrix's concentration was on his playing, and very little of his effort was devoted to the backbends and gymnastics that were once his trademarks. He also showed a foxy sexuality in his singing and in his little introductions to each song. His movements were as graceful and as lustful as his playing. He displayed a controlled abandon in the faster numbers which come closer to rhythm and blues than anything else. He's currently being backed by Mitch'S, his drummer from the original Jimi Hendrix Experience, and by bassist Billy Cox, who was with him in a short-lived group called A Band of Gypsies. Both were competent and provided a good background, but the show belonged to Hendrix. Preceding Hendrix were two groups, Savage Grace and Oz. Savage Grace had an excellent pianist and good vocal arrangements. Their sound was solid, but they had little showmanship and ended up being fairly boring. Oz, on the other hand, started slowly, then picked up speed with 2 or 3 country rock numbers which also featured some nice harmonies. They were good enough to make the audience want more, but the group quit while they were ahead. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will continue the deep dive into May 1970 of the Jimi Hendrix story and the continuing Cry of Love US tour. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any photos, stories, or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Until next time,